racer.
Yeah.
That's really
I was
cool.
going to say
And,
that.
first and foremost,
right? You're not.
I'd love to start by like talking about like what just happened just recently. I saw an article, whatever, a day ago. Like, came out. You were what, tied for seventh in the Lifetime Series. Classification. You made $8,000, and half of it you're donating, which is unheard of.
Yeah, so at the start of the season, and even when I applied for the Grand Prix last year, that was kind of a big part of what I wanted to do. And in like kind of typical Rob fashion, like fly under the radar for a lot of these events, which is fine. So no one really like knew about it. Like I knew about it, but it was sort of unbeknownst to most other people that I was doing this. And it wasn't about like, like just like, yo, look what I'm doing. It was just like, that was just a thing I was going to do. I felt like it was important to do. And then we were chatting before the final event, and I just brought it up that I was like, oh, I'm really stoked to be in the money, and I just hope that I can finish inside the top 10, because like the points, like if I had a really bad day or a really bad mechanical, it wouldn't have taken much to slide outside of the cash. But I was stoked because whatever I made, that was like, a pretty significant donation for WIRTH. And then in addition to the money we raised for the FKT earlier in the year, it was like going to put it over 10 grand. Like, so yeah, I think that makes like a big difference for a lot of people. That's something like, I think 50 or 60 people, like full count, like a full set of 4 counseling sessions. So yeah, it's a lot.
Can you tell us about WIRTH?
Yeah, so WIRTH, they finally received their registered nonprofit status this year, which makes it great for donations for a lot of people now. But essentially, WIRTH is a hat company. That's how they make their money. And with the sale of each hat, they put money towards one counseling session for someone, and they provide free counseling for people who need it, who can't afford it, because counseling is not always like for most, even if you have a decent benefit package, it's not covered by most. And counseling sessions, just like any other kind of self-help, it's not cheap. Like you're probably looking at anywhere from $100 being like a good deal to, $200 per hour. And WIRTH, you just kind of provide your info. I know it's anywhere in North America. It may be anywhere like globally, and they'll connect you. It's obviously online counseling, but yeah, and then it just provides help for people who need it. And I think like even for myself and a lot of my friends, like I've seen firsthand how beneficial counseling is, and like just mental health in general, and being like kind of comfortable with who you are and kind of all of that. Like I don't pretend to be like a mental health like advocate. I don't know that field super well, but I know it's something that like is really important, and it's like doing something like this is not hard for me to do. So that made it kind of a pretty easy choice to work with them. And yeah, like I said, it's the nice thing too as well is when you commit to it, you have to commit to 4 sessions, which I think is key. Most people think it's one and done, but it's really important to have a few sessions when you talk with the counselors, because you kind of end up like unbuttoning a lot of stuff, and actually like you become a much better person, and you get a lot of great direction. So yeah, it's great for me.
Good for you. That's awesome. And the Lifetime Grand Prix was super hotly contested too. Like the top 20 was like who's who. It was anybody's game, like right toward the last couple of events, right?
Yeah, it was it definitely, that top 10 was just sort of like the top 10 had like about 13 or 14 guys. They were just kind of like in constant motion. Keegan was, I think, pretty much in a league of his own because he swept 4 of them. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of movement. Even on the last day, I think on the last day, the whole top 10 did a big shuffle, like 2nd through 9th. there was like, yeah, a bunch of movement, which, I mean, I was kind of one of them. Like I ended up being tied for 7th when I started. And then Lachlan, I can't remember if he finished or ended up having to drop out. He's out. So I like moved up for a hot second. And then Payson didn't start. So I moved up again. But then Andrew Lesperance was only 1 point behind me. He came over, like Robert had like a great race, jumped way over. Like he moved up like 5 spots in the last race. House moved up. But it's like you're trying to do this mental math because it's all just single points. So you're like, depending on where people place and how far back I place, everything can change. So yeah, that last day it was wild, and like, holy, it was fast. Like,
Was it? Yeah.
Oh, it was like being like road fast. Like there's crosswind, all these little rollers, and you just kind of pop out and it's exposed, and it just reminded me of like racing before, like on the road, where it's just the field just because it doesn't have the depth, right? You have hundreds of people at the start line, but like when it detonates, it's like it just doesn't come back together because it's not like you can like kind of the team is going to chase or like there's tactics on his teammates. So it's just like when it goes, it's gone. Yeah. And they didn't slow up.
And this event you're talking about was the Big Sugar, right, in Arkansas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was, I was in such bad shape when I got there, and it was just, I suffered like a dog for 5 hours, like cramping, my bike hands, bad. Everything is still so sore. Like it's a hard course, like deceivingly hard. And then like it had been a long season. So I was just like clinging to like just the threads of my form.
Well, we're kind of doing this in reverse, but you just said like, we're talking about right now instead of how you cycling in the first place, which I want to hear about. But
yeah.
You just gave us a perfect lead in with talking about your season. Like you've had a crazy season. So like I said at the top, like I use the word retired really loosely. You don't seem tired at all. I just checked on Strava. You've cycled like 800 hours this year. That's not a retired cyclist at all. You've had a crazy season, and I follow all these races on Instagram and all of it, and it's like Rob Britton. Like right near the top of all this stuff. So like I want to sort of unpack your year. Like first of all, when you first retired, did you know that you were going to be this busy, or did it just sort of like, I'll race a little, and then your calendar was packed?
It was definitely the latter. Yeah, I stopped. I was like, for one, yeah, the retirement word I'm not actually allowed to use around my wife anymore. I get in trouble. So yeah, I don't say that anymore. But and rightfully so, I guess. But yeah, like I had full intention of doing these Scrabble events. I kind of applied for Belgian Waffle Ride and SBT to get in. Like some were a lottery, and then a few other events of the year, kind of pick, choose, this and that. Applied for the Lifetime Grand Prix and got in. Like I remember sitting in the office with Easton and got this call, and it was just it was a New York number, and like I never really get spam calls from New York of all places. So again, I knew it was around the time they were going to be doing the announcement for the Grand Prix. So I'm like, I'll just take this call for a second, and I go, hey, you're in. And then right then I was like, holy shit, like this season went from being like pretty sparsely filled to like very filled. And now it's like, all these different places all over the US, plus the stuff I'd already kind of wanted to do in Canada and like the other US events, plus FKT, plus bikepacking. And then it was just like, shit, this year's full. And I didn't account for the travel that would be around that as well.
Yeah, like logistically, like what a nightmare. And travel is not exactly easy these days, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we were still in, like at that time, we were still definitely dealing with like a lot of like, okay, travel's kind of okay. Like sure. If you cross this border, you don't need a test, but if you fly, you need this test and all this crap. And it's like, oh my gosh. Like, so,
and can you explain, it's 6 events, right? The Lifetime Series?
Yes. So the Grand Prix is 3 mountain bike and 3 road. 3 gravel. So it's a Sea Otter mountain bike was how it started off, which in of itself is just a crazy event. Then you do Unbound, so it's a big gap. It's like almost 2-month gap, and then you do Unbound, which is kind of the crown jewel of the whole series, right? That's by most people considered like the biggest gravel event in the world. I wouldn't disagree. Then you have Crusher and the Tusher, which is was a new one. I think they just acquired at the end of last year. And that's in Beaver, Utah, a place most people haven't even heard of. But it's a beautiful course and just a unique event. That's gravel again. Then it's Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race. Like that's one of the most iconic mountain bike races in the world. Like I had no idea how big of a deal it was till I was there. Then this one I'd never heard of, and like I don't even know if I say it right to this day, but Schwamigan.
Yeah.
And it's like this is like I think it's in like Wisconsin or something. Like I didn't go to that one this year. I basically just ran out of money, so I ended up doing BC bike race and kind of like hoped that I wouldn't have a bad Big Sugar because the series is best 5 out of 6. And the final one was Big Sugar back over, in Arkansas, in Walmartville, Bentonville. And that was like, it was interesting going to all these places. Like, the whole year was a constant rotation of just like all this, a new experience, new event, like a new place, like, meeting all these new people, doing like obviously new events. It was like incredible. And yeah, ending up in Walmartville of all places was pretty cool. The amount of money and effort they've done for cycling in that place is wild. Like, yeah, the Waltons, they have done a pretty impressive job of creating like cycling in a place you would never ever expect it.
And all kinds too, right? Like Tyler, you were just there, and Tyler said the same thing to me. Like he just couldn't believe what they've done, the infrastructure they've created for it.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I was just like so cracked on the year, but had I not been, I would have probably stayed for another few days for sure and ridden the mountain bike trails because I love mountain biking and they sound just incredible. And when you look at like Bentonville, it's just everywhere. Like it's everywhere, and they're all really well maintained. Like everyone, for a small town that you wouldn't expect to have as much respect from like the drivers, it's like I think it's because they don't know what the Walton kids look like, so anybody could be one, and they don't want to risk running one over, so you're safe. So yeah,
that's great. Now, so a lot of people transition from road to gravel, and I totally get that move, but not everybody spends days on end in the woods. Like that's a totally different level. Did you, was it hard? Like, did you have that kind of interest when you were younger before you became a pro? And did you always want to get back to that? Because bike packing's obviously exploded, but to go and do, like you almost kicked off your season with the BC Epic, right?
Yeah, so the BC Epic, for me, in my like timeline of things, was like halfway through my year. That was like right. I think before that was the last time I like actually trained like an athlete should train. After that, it was just sort of like fixing injuries and like driving places. But yeah, so when I was a kid, no, I was like I never grew up in like an outdoorsy family. I just like yeah, growing up in Regina, it's not like you're around the mountains or like forests. Like my folks never, like my dad hates camping.
You weren't like Swain Tuck, like you weren't.
you were deep in explain where Regina is?
So other than being the city that rhymes with fun, Regina is basically it's the capital city of Saskatchewan. It is in a very flat, very windy part of the country, kind of directly north of North Dakota, but it just gets flatter, colder, and windier. You get proper Canadian winter 6 months a year. We had 3 roads to ride on essentially for road riding. Mountain biking was effectively only ever in like a valley. And I'm not like, it's pretty impressive the cycling culture that exists in a place that you wouldn't imagine it would. And yeah, I mean, if you've ridden to a headwind, like you can appreciate how hard they are. So you get strength for things that you wouldn't think you would. But the funny thing was, like, my trade when I raced road was like climbing at altitude stage races, and I grew up in a flat place at sea level, and go figure.
So can you explain how that happened? So growing up in Saskatchewan, were you riding a lot by yourself?
Yeah, so like I didn't start riding, like I think I got my first road bike in grade 9 or 10. I didn't start really riding, like, doing races and stuff and riding like what I consider like a real bike, like not a department store bike. I didn't start that until it would have been, I want to say, kind of the start of grade 8, maybe, maybe the end of grade 7. Saved up money, like bought my teacher's like old Trek mountain bike, and then fully got bitten by the bug. Love cycling. I was so bad at it, like just like horrible, but I just loved it, and it was something I could do by myself. It wasn't a team sport. I was never any good at like other sports. It was like just the riding itself, like, was something that my parents would need to like be involved to drive you around. Plus, you're still at that age where it's like this, like you can't drive, but you still want to like explore. So back when you could just run around like a wildling and like no one really cared where you went. So like ride around a ton, and it just grew like as this crazy passion all through high school. And like, I had told this story a bunch, but I had this like mastermind plan that like had zero sort of foundation to it. It was just like an idea I had. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna race my bike, and then I'm gonna go out to Victoria to the National Training Center and be in the national team, and then be like a professional cyclist. And it's like there's no map for this. There's like this is pre-cell phones, email was kind of a new thing at this time. Like, no one from Canada at this point, like other than like maybe like Mike Barry or something, had done like pro road. Like, I look up to guys like Ryder and like Roland on the mountain bike side of things, like Seamus, all these guys. Like, we had huge mountain bikers, and like I realized I probably wouldn't be a pro mountain biker because I sucked at chapter riding coming from Saskatchewan, believe it or not. So that's how I just progressed, and like each year I got a little bit better. But yeah, it's like the story of my career, right? It's like I got like 5% better each year, like clockwork. But when you start out really bad, 5% doesn't make a big difference. But when you get kind of good and you start like actually making like real improvements, 5% when you're actually kind of good is like, that's a huge jump. And it just kept happening. Like every single year there was making like leaps and bounds by the end, to like obviously a certain point, but probably to about 2017, 2018. It's like, yeah, just kept improving. So I went from riding around Saskatchewan on like a down tube shifting like 8-speed Chinelli road bike that was like a 62 centimeter to like my last year like racing like Tour of Swiss, like with like some of the biggest names in the world. Like, a kid from Saskatchewan is just, there's that, it never happened before and it hasn't happened since, and like who knows if it'll happen again. I mean, I hope it does, like I hope someone finds it, but yeah, the transition, the places you go, it's pretty wild looking back.
Yeah, you won the Tour of Utah. What was that in 2018?
2017, yeah.
Maybe? Yeah. Tour of Gila twice. That's insanely hard races with tons of climbing. Yeah, like you said, altitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved hearing one of your favorite races you did was helping Mike Woods win a bronze medal in the World Championship there in Australia. Austria. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an incredible day. It was the only time I did road race worlds. I'd done time trial the year before, but obviously it's super special because that's the only medal Canada's got in men's road since Bauer, and but before that it was kind of going back to the bikepacking thing. I had done a very unconventional kind of prep for worlds. So I'd done a full summer of like road racing and stuff. I was in like really good shape at the end of the summer. I did the Montreal and Quebec World Tour races, and then came home and went bikepacking for 11 days through like basically all of British Columbia and like the Canadian Rockies all the way up the coast. You know, not exactly paying attention to like my nutrition or like training peaks. And got to Worlds, and there was kind of that like, so I remember like the guys just being like, you went bikepacking as your prep. And I kind of kept like, I didn't make a lot of posts about it because I was like myself kind of nervous. I'd never bikepacking before in my life. And let alone before, effectively, like at this time, I think it was considered like the hardest road worlds in years. And I was like, so they're asking before, and like, how do you think you'll go? How do you feel? Like, you know, no one knew, but like my knees had like fully blown out like during that bikepacking, and it's like I was like suffering just like walking around, and like, you know, riding was not very comfortable, but I felt like I was pretty fit. So ended up getting the break, and the rest is kind of like it went down. But before that, I had no idea. Before that race, I was like terrified because I knew it was a big deal, and like Kevin, the director for Cycling Canada, High Performance, kind of stuck his neck out and like let me do this bikepacking thing, because I almost bailed on going to Worlds just because I'd committed to my friends I wanted to do this trip. Like it was my idea. I'd not had a lot of love for Cycling Canada in the past, like, and so it was more important to me to like do this thing with my friends that we had talked about. It was, you know, really important, and Cycling Canada could wait. But then Ricky told me to just do both. So just like everything else, she's usually right, and I pushed for it, and Kevin's like, yeah, sounds great. So, but yeah, it's kind of funny that it all worked out, but it just as easily, like I could have missed that break and then I would have just died in the field, I think. But in the end, yeah, kind of everything worked out real nice.
So during that trip, did you realize that you wanted to do like FKT attempts and racing bikepacking? Because it's pretty different.
Yeah, I mean, no, during that, it was just learning everything, mostly how much better gear can be and how much better my like friends who like camp are at all the non-biking stuff. Yeah, like to give you like a bit of a backstory on the bikepacking, like I grew up was never like a really outdoorsy person. I liked it, but like I never camped. I never had that nice gear. I mean, before the bikepacking trip, like this kind of stuff, like basically like cyclotourism was a joke to me, like an actual like joke. Like these people are lame, like they just ride around, like this is dumb. And then it was the craziest thing. I had this dream one night, and it was like an earworm. Like I woke up, and in my dream it was like, oh, like it'd be cool to like pioneer a route like from Calgary to like Victoria, like because we were staying in Calgary, like that's where Vic was going to med school. You know, home for us really felt like the West Coast. Like all my best friends were still out there. So I woke up, and then like I've been into making routes, so I just started to route it out. Seemed like it could make sense. Reached out to like my core group of friends who always seem to be down for doing some kind of dumb thing with me. So they like yeah, sounds good. None of us had ever bikepacked before. Didn't own the bags. Had no idea about any of this stuff. Like my one friend Jamie, like camp, like he's a very outdoorsy person. So he already had like gear. I had an air mattress, and that was about it. Like I had to, you know, I used Ricky's tent and a lot of she had camping stuff. She's an outdoorsy person, but so I borrowed her stuff, bought like, you know, a sleeping bag, we all bought the bags. And then like literally the first time we went like and did like an overnighter, all of us, like myself, Jamie Taylor, and my friend Nick Hamilton, the first time was on this trip. Like it was just like, well, and it is the craziest feeling, and I still get it to a degree, but nothing like the first time. Is like when you leave a place and you kind of have your house packed onto your bike and you're not coming back. This is like a one-way ticket. That is it, and you don't know what lies ahead. Like especially this time, it's like there's so many unknowns, and I planned as much as I could, but you really had no idea how rugged it was going to be. Like if anything breaks, like all that stuff is crazy. Like it's not like you have every meal planned. You just sort of like figure it out as you go. And I just like fell in love with it. But doing like FKT stuff, like that world didn't really exist to a degree back then, or like it wasn't as like in a competitive sense. Like I never really looked at the bike packing as like competitive. It's like almost my sort of compensation for being ultra competitive all of the time. Like it was just I go out, check out. There was no like I always like have a power meter on all my bikes just because. But like it's more to look at it like retroactively. You're like, oh wow, we burnt 8,000 kJs today. That's a lot. But otherwise, like I liked bike packing because I was unplugging from pro road racing. And then now it's still kind of that thing, but now we search out like just crazy adventures. Like the one we did this summer was, yeah, I'm still like still processing it. It was so over the top, like on every single like metric. That one was insane.
That's awesome.
Great. So this summer you combined bikepacking and racing together to do a FKT. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the elephant that you saw.
Oh man, yeah. So the BC Epic 1000 is it's an established route from Merritt to Fernie, British Columbia. Each summer around solstice they do like a mass start event, and you can do an individual time trial either from Merritt to Fernie or Fernie to Merritt. In that first bikepacking trip, we had done a lot of portions of the like westbound route, so I had some idea of a few pieces of the route, but we did it in September, and this was like the opposite. This was very early in the season, so I had no idea because a lot of these tracks get run down by ATVs and motos. But this year, it was kind of the latest the latest spring, summer we've like ever had. Like for reference, the year before, or like multiple years before, when they done the mass start, they're dealing with like crazy heat already because you go through the Okanagan, crazy heat, drought-like conditions, fire, smoke, all this kind of stuff. This year I was dealing with flood, like borderline like flooding issues and like crazy amounts of standing water. I made a little video of it just when I was cracked already. It took until I think about 2 or 3 o'clock in the like second day that I finally went above like double digits in Celsius. So it was, below 10 for most of it until about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So yeah, basically the ride, I finished Unbound, came home, had like a week to recover from that because I felt like, well, Unbound's like 200 miles. So I'm like, well, this is like 600 miles. And yeah, I'll be in shape. That's good. Just do that. Let's roll it over. And so it kind of went a bit sideways at the start. My friend was supposed to fly into Calgary, and then we would just drive casually, get to fly into Vancouver, drive my truck casually to Merritt. I could like chill, eat food, like nap, because it's like a 3.5-hour drive. His flight got delayed the morning of, and delayed to the point where I'm like, okay, well, essentially I just kind of like threw him to the wolves because I had too much stuff to figure out. And like, well, you got to figure out how to get to Merritt. So I got to go. And I ended up having to drive myself. And because I'd waited so long, I ended up in like Vancouver traffic, like rush hour. So my plan was to start at 9 p.m., like with the theory of like there's this ferry you have to catch midway through, or like after about 3/4. And it obviously only runs certain hours of the day. So I wanted to catch it like not like basically try to catch like the very first one. So like work backwards from that. Figured if I left at 9, that would work out well. Use that adrenaline that you have for the excitement of the event to just push through that first night. And it was great. Like I wasn't tired at all that first night, but I was up from 6 a.m. on Tuesday morning, until I guess probably about 11 p.m. on Friday. I had a total of maybe 3.5 hours of sleep total. Like, so it was pretty wild. Yeah, so on the ride, that first night was no problem, burnt through it easy. You kind of get a bit tired, and then it's like, you know, your body starts to like struggle, like once you've been riding for like 12, 13 hours straight, like without really taking a break. And then from then on, it's just like you're running pretty light gear, but you still have like the bike's loaded down. Like I had a sleeping bag and an air mattress, no shelter. So it's like I needed to get to a few places. And that first, like, so I went at 9 p.m., went 24 hours through, and then at about, I think it ended up being like 11 or 12, just above Christina Lake or Castlegar, you go through these crazy tunnels, train tunnels. And my initial thought was like, oh, I'll just sleep in one of these. They're sheltered, easy. First one I went through, I saw a rat that was like the size of my forearm. And I went, all right, no thanks. These ones are occupied. And I'm like, all right, cool, let's keep riding. And then I remembered from like years back, the bikepacking trip, there was this like actual shelter, like proper nice, like 3-walled, like permanent, almost like a picnic area with picnic tables and stuff underneath it, like at the very, very top. So okay, I'll get there. It was actually like on the descent, and I was so tired at this point. Like I was drifting off while I was riding the bike, like full on catching myself, and like how, I don't even know how I got here. And that happened like 3 or 4 times. I had my jacket unzipped, like just trying to catch a chill and like be like cold so that I just wake up. And I wasn't waking up, and to the point where I was probably less than 5 minutes away from either crashing or just like pulling over and sleeping like on the side of this like dirt road, just because it was getting like, I'm going to fall for sure. And if I go that way, it's like, it's kind of off a cliff. So I don't want to like get this sorted. So I did find a place to sleep, slept for about an hour, like some air matched up on the picnic table. It was great. You know, changed into new chamois, like undershirt, like a dry layer. You know, put up my vitamins and my can of Red Bull. Set my alarm on my phone for an hour. And it was like blink. I closed my eyes. I was so tired. It wasn't even like, you know, sometimes it takes a while to fall asleep. I blinked, and that was it. I was out. Then the next day, you start to get really tired. And the body was shutting down pretty hard. Like that was the only mechanical I had. Like ended up pushing through essentially like a third night. So first night, no problem. Second night, had a nap. Next day, slept for maybe 30 minutes on that ferry. So ran down about an hour and a half of sleep at this point. And my body just like, the distance seemed okay, but that last bit of the BC Epic is just wild. Like there's so many different parts of it. Like you go like fast fire service roads, like quad, like ATV trail, mountain bike single track. But as you get close to the end, you just get more and more of this like really twisty, technical, slow stuff. And doing it in the dark after, 40 hours of like moving or whatever it was, like 50 hours of being on the road. And like, I remember like, oh, it's only 160K. Like I'm in the home stretch, I'm done. But it's just like, it's, the last 10K of the marathon, like anybody will tell you that's when like, most people drop out, like, because they're just done. And that was like, I remember my body was so screwed, and I was coming unglued, like a puncture, like a spoke broke. I have no idea. Like if you put me there today and I said like, figure out how you went through this area, like there's no chance. Like I was just falling blindly, my like head unit on the Wahoo, because there's just all these twists adding in all this distance. Like as a crow flies, it's probably 20K, and it took me 6 or 7 hours. So I ended up being out for a full extra night, and it was just as sun was rising. And like, I thought I'd seen a few things before. And I'm like, okay, no, it's like in like normal animals, like an elk or a deer or something, which could have been there, but I don't think they were. And then it was like, I remember looking to my left, and actually like out loud being like, what are you doing, elephant? And then I'm like, holy shit, I am tripping. And then I think I just started laughing because like at that point I'm like, it's happened. Like I'm tripping out. Like
here it is. Yeah. I've heard about this. It's happening now.
Exactly. It's like, people are like, oh yeah, you'll hallucinate if you're out like long enough. And I thought I was fine. Like I was just getting kind of grumpy and over it. But like then all of a sudden, yeah, like I knew, you know, obviously there's not an elephant there, but you're like kind of looking back like, and then after that, it's like I think I just lost the plot. Like the first night I tried like just like audible self-talk. I'm like, I'll just talk myself out, keep me awake. And that lasted for like 30 seconds. And it's like, okay, well, that's not gonna happen. And then by the final night, we're having full-on conversations. Like it's like there's like 2 or 3 different personalities out there just like having a good old debate. Like probably sound like an absolute crazy person like coming into Fernie, but yeah, it kind of kept me going. Like so, but yeah, the elephant thing, that's kind of cool. Like I mean, probably not healthy to get to that point, but without taking any like illicit drugs, it's pretty impressive to see yourself or see things. So yeah.
And you smashed the record, what, 7+ hours? Something like
that? Yeah. I mean, I still think it's possible. Like I hoped to do it in under 2 days. And I think had it been like the regular court, because I had to do a modification because the main pass when I did it was still under like meters of snow.
That's what I was asking. You were diverted around Grey Creek, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I had to go down. Yeah, it adds 50K and 500 meters of elevation. So that's not it. And you still do a big climb. Like, so, and I still ended up having to hike like 3 kilometers over the top of this freaking mountain through snow. So it was definitely no like just cakewalk. But yeah, it was, oh gosh, like, yeah, it was crazy that like took so much longer, and to the point where like, yeah, that last night I hadn't anticipated, because I did truly think like 48 hours was going to be like hard but achievable. Like I'm like, okay, under normal circumstances, like I say, it's like, you know, I could have packed lighter, I would have had less clothes. You know, it's warmer, so you're moving faster. I have less layers on, so my body probably would have like not started like chafing and like breaking down like it did. So all these things add up to where you're actually moving. Like, because I think when I got to the ferry, even then I was like, I knew at that point I wasn't going to break 48 hours, but I was probably on track for like 9 or 10 hours faster. And then I came unglued so bad that final night, like just, you know.
Would that be the ferry from like Balfour to?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've ferried with the bike a number of times.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was, yeah, I remember, yeah, when I got the flat tire in the middle of the night, I started looking at it and like being so, like, it's not a complicated thing, but I had Cushcore in there and I didn't even bring tire levers. So I remember like looking at it and being like, wow, that is a first. Like I've never had a puncture. Like it came because the spoke broke, it punched the rim tape. So I thought I couldn't plug it. There's nothing to plug. It's just, there was a hole in the rim. So there's just air escaping. So I had to take everything off. So it got complicated for a person who hadn't slept for 2 days. So that was a fun little project. Yeah, about 2 a.m. in the dark on some road. Yeah.
A long way from a pro team following you with a new bike. Okay.
Yeah, I was just putting the hand up from the service came. No, it was yeah, it was rad. And then, you know, he finished, and like the funny thing was like no one will ever see this footage, thank God. But Matt Clark, the videographer I had, so like I remember like I finished and was like just cracked, but like, you know, it's 8 a.m, so the sun's coming up, you're kind of coming back to life a bit, and you know, go to the hotel room that we'd booked, and you know, we got a late checkout, so we had till 11. We still had to do kind of like B-roll, like post-ride film, and there's a reason why there's no like post-ride film on there, because like I had 2 beer afterwards, you know, as you do at 8 a.m. And I was like between just being exhausted, like, I mean, I was hallucinating, so I was obviously not in a great place, like mind frame. And Matt like he'd been up for more or less the same amount of time I had driving, so he's not like at his sharpest. He said there was not one piece of audio that he like that was usable. It was just like, which is funny. It's like, I'm like, yeah, I sounded bad. Like, obviously I was pretty out of it. He's like, mate, I was no better. I thought it sounded pretty good at the time, and then I listened to it afterwards, and it's just terrible. Like, so I'd kind of like to just make like just a blooper reel of just how bad like of a place you're in after something like that. Like, yeah, it's wild. So yeah, hopefully that footage never sees like the public light of day.
But you want to give it another go.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I think if someone broke the record, I would probably like actually give it, like, having done it, it's like, I think like you learn so much in these things. It's just like so many things this year, right? It's like, you know, I raced my bike for like over 10 years and to still be finding new things to love about cycling, new kinds of cycling to love, and also like better ways to do it and like different ways to do things it's really exciting. But also like that ride like really fucked me up. Like sorry, I should swear. It really,
Oh no,
yeah, really hurt. Like my hands, like to this day, like these fingers are still numb on the fingertips a bit. I didn't wear gloves because it's like in like that typical, like I have lots of good gloves. I always race with gloves, but in the typical like roadie mindset, it's like, oh, this is like a training ride. And when you train, you always use bare hands just because that's what you do. And like you just sit on that nerve for so long with no reprieve. Yeah, it kind of like this, my right hand's fine now, but my left hand's still, yeah, fingertips are not quite there. Yeah, I did some like pretty wild like skin damage to my nether regions, like just from the, like I got soaked on the first day and it just never dried. So it's just crazy chafing. And then my knees, because of that, were destroyed. Like I actually had to get, like, for the first time in my career, a cortisone shot in my knee just to like, yeah, because it was so inflamed that the treatment that usually worked, like it just wasn't having an effect because it was so like lit up. So I had to get it. We had to get cortisone, take a week to let that work, and then get my usual like dry needling done. So that was. It took me, like, I had this grand ambition to do other things because it was like a downtime. I was like, I'm gonna do mountain biking. Like, it's gonna be great. It's summer. Like the dirt's just getting good. And for 3 weeks, I think I rode maybe 5 hours total. Like, and yeah, and for the rest of the season, I was just like dull. Like all those races I did, I was just like, I just never came back and never sharpened back up. And then I didn't do myself any favors when we went bikepacking for 11 days in the wilderness. So yeah.
And the BC bike race, which like you were 4th overall in the BC bike race, not a professional biker. Like that's incredible after the season you put together. And I know who some of those guys are up there. Like I know Carter Newesteg pretty well. Carter was a monster. Like racing around at his level for a week is amazing that you did that after the year you put together.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's like I've never done a mountain bike stage race before, obviously, and I had no idea. Like we raced at like an XCO every day because like I can't ride the technical stuff like those guys can. Obviously, like they've been doing that their whole lives, like, and so the only way I could make a dent on them was to just go absolutely crazy on the climbs. So anytime, and like in the Okanagan, it's not like the West Coast. These are big climbs, like big 45-minute long climbs every day. So I would just put them to the sword, like every single climb. And
I'm sure they appreciated it.
I'm sure.
Well, it's like at the start, it was like they're kind of joking, but like at the same time, they didn't, like, I forced their hand because they had to chase. So I just tried to break them every single day. And then I figured it's like at the top of these ascents, I would need at least 3 minutes on most of them. And hopefully I could, like, the days were long enough that I could crack them and they'd like fully come unglued and then I could open the gap. And that worked a couple times, but they actually recovered better than anticipated they would. And then they kind of figured my strategy out pretty well. It's like they'd hold me for a bit, but then like I think when they start to crack a bit more, they'd let the gap go out because they knew that they could just close that on the descent. Like even if they had to risk it a bit more on the descent, like for them risking it is just having more fun. So yeah, and like I'm just like I looked at, speaking of Carter, I looked at his heart rate profile from like one of the stages and myself, and like I think we finished within like 30 seconds of each other. And my heart rate basically does, like if you took away the elevation, like backdrop, you would just see, it would look like I was doing a time trial, like just basically like this with little ups and downs. When you see Carter's, it's like he's recovering on all this, like he's going down to like 115 beats on the descents. Like mine goes from 195 to like 187 on the descents. Like I'm tense, I'm not recovering, like I'm just trying not to make as many mistakes. And I know these guys are just like charging from behind. So yeah, but by the end, oh my God, like my brain was fried. Mountain bike races are so hard on you, like mentally, it's crazy. So I think that was kind of backing that up with like 2 days later doing the BCDR gravel. I think was kind of the nail in the coffin, like 12 days of racing in 14 days. It's kind of like going back to the old day job. And yeah, I felt like I never really came back from that one. Like, yeah, I was like, I recovered physically just fine, but I think mentally I was just so done with the year at that point, and having Big Sugar as like this standalone event, like weeks removed from the BC bike races, is like, oh, I don't think I did like a single real training ride over 4 hours, or even under 4 hours for that matter, like of proper riding. So yeah, I was pretty blown out at that point.
So what does next year look like so far? And where can people follow along? Where can people find you on social media and stuff? Because there's obviously a lot more adventuring coming and people should be paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So working on next year, I had a lot of really great partners this year. Like obviously like Easton, Castelli, Schwabi, like Factor, felt like they all great. A lot of them are sticking around next year and like coming back to the table because they really liked what my program looked like this year. So next year will be similar. Obviously still need to, like for something like the Lifetime Grand Prix, I need to apply for that. You know, Belgium Waffle Ride Series looks pretty cool. It's a bunch of like, new events. You know, midway through this year, I looked at it and realized I could do 6 different events every year for like 3 years, and I would never have to overlap. And those would be 6 great events. Like there's so many great events. It's really important to me that I do the ones in Canada when it's possible. Obviously, it's important to support home races, and it's really special to be able to race at home after, especially the career I've had, like having rarely been able to race in British Columbia over my professional career. So, you know, BC Bike Race Mountain Bike is a big target next year. It's on the island, so that's huge. You know, trying something like Trans Rocky Single Track 6, I really enjoyed mountain biking this year. So I want to maybe do more of that next year. Racing, I'd like to actually try to train for these and be fit, because like Unbound was probably one of the few I was trained up for properly, and it went quite well. But yeah, and then FKTs and that kind of stuff, the adventure side of it, that one always takes a bit more planning. I have a few in mind. Like I'd really like to try this Trans Cordilleras down in Colombia. It's like a week long. I think it's a week long. Like self-supported bikepacking race. It just sounds incredible. Pete Stetna and Lawrence did it last year, and I was pretty jealous of that. So that's something on my radar. Migration race in Africa, like Baja Divide. There's a really cool and that might come back, but that's sort of like over the next couple of years. I can't do all of that in a season. And then Finland Gravel is another one I'm super stoked on. I'd like to do more international stuff now that travel's kind of normal again. It's something I love to do. I love to go around to new places, like globally. And then there's shoot, there's the one in
Iceland. What about the one in Iceland?
The Rift, yeah, it's come up a few times, but it kind of, I don't want to say it's played out because that's not. It's like Iceland's unique, but also it's like when you live in Canada, you kind of do get exposed to like cold, gray days a lot. Like it looks beautiful, but it's also, I think, super common to just get like crazy wind, cold, wet days there, and like I don't necessarily love that. Like, you know, growing up in the Pacific Northwest, or like, you know, living in the Pacific Northwest, I get a lot of that. And if I can only kind of like maximize like X number of like international travel days each year, I don't know if the Rift would jump to the top, although Iceland in itself is like a place like I like to go, maybe not necessarily just for that. Like if I went there, I would definitely try to do more than just that event. Same as Finland gravel. Like I have a close friend who lives in Helsinki. But I mean, you're going to these places and like just doing the event, there's so much more. I mean, like perfect example, last weekend in Bentonville, gravel race, but it's like you come for the gravel race and you stick around to ride the mountain bike trails. Like I think Finland, like, you know, you go for the event and then you stick around to, you know, like drive race cars with Valtteri Bottas or something. I don't know. You do like take advantage of like the places you get to see. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff I want to do. It's just kind of plotting out what that looks like, and then like I say, having obviously like a decent amount of racing because there's still that part of me that is like hyper competitive. And after this year, it's like I felt like I just kind of like not nailed it in, but it was definitely more of a rest year after like racing for so long. Like I just needed to not be focused, but it's like almost like a really long off season of just fun. But now maybe it's like take those races a bit more seriously and see what happens.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this, man. We're going to be following along for sure. You have two big fans here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. It's awesome.
No, thank you guys. Yeah, no, it's cool. Obviously, like, yeah, it's nice to share the story about like, yeah, with Tyler. I remember, yeah, watching you like race back like when I was, yeah, this kid in Saskatchewan when I like, first moved out here. It's just been like, that's been like the highlight of, or one of the highlights of like my career is like meeting guys like yourself who like were so influential like in like my early career, like, you know, getting to know like Ryder Heschel, the same thing. It's like he's this guy no one like, or like, you know, you look up to, and then you like end up meeting these people, and it's just sort of, yeah, cycling is a pretty special sport because of that. So yeah, no, thank you guys for taking the time to chat. I'm glad you enjoy the stuff I do. It's like it's nice sharing it, and then hopefully more people kind of hear about it and like get jazzed up to go on a gravel ride or go try bike packing or even do road racing. Like it's just, I think it's important to share those experiences, and not everything has to be the hyper competitiveness or like super funded thing that people maybe think it does. Like there's a lot of really great things you can do without ever having like getting a paycheck to do it. Like, yeah, a lot of this stuff you can enjoy it just as much like on a weekend for free.
Totally. Well, but
Man, you're awesome, Rob. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time. Hey, my 2 cents, have a good off season. Make sure you get some good rest. You had a big year this year, so.
Thank you. Yeah,
we're
actually going to go down to Mexico for 10 days without bikes. So yeah.
Good.
Rest, recover, sunshine, gear up for next year. Thanks again, Rob. Really appreciate it, man. Great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Be safe.
Rob.
See you.